The door opens with a bang, and Amara walks across the hall with the triplets around her. Damon freezes as he recognizes in the children's eyes the future he rejected. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. Manhattan's skyline gleamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Upper East Side penthouse, the afternoon sun casting golden reflections across Central Park's autumn canopy. Amara Jones stood motionless by the window, her slender fingers clutching a paper that had changed everything. The medical report confirmed what weeks of morning sickness had suggested. She was pregnant. Not with one child, but 3. Rain began to patter against the glass, mirroring the nervous rhythm of her heart. She glanced at her watch. Damon would be home soon. After 3 months of marriage to one of New York's most promising financial titans, she still felt the flutter of anticipation before he walked through the door. She remembered their first meeting at the Columbia University fundraiser, how his confident stride had parted the crowd of Manhattan elites, his eyes finding hers across the room. The whirlwind courtship that followed seemed like a fairy tale. Private jets to weekend getaways, intimate dinners at restaurants that required months-long reservations, and finally, a proposal that left her breathless. The Wellington family's reception had been considerably cooler. Their tight smiles at the small private wedding barely masked their discomfort with Damon's choice, a black woman from a modest Boston background, regardless of her Columbia honors degree and obvious intelligence. "She's suitable enough for now," she'd overheard Damon's mother whisper to his sister during the reception, "at least until he needs to make a more appropriate match for the family's future." The elevator's distinctive ping interrupted her memories. Damon was home early. Amara smoothed her silk blouse, tucking the ultrasound results into her pocket. She wanted the moment to be perfect. Damon Wellington strode into the apartment, his 6'2" frame impeccably dressed in a charcoal Brioni suit. At 35, he was at the peak of his powers, handsome, wealthy, and fiercely ambitious. Without looking up from his phone, he tossed his keys into a hand-blown glass bowl on the console table. "Market's up 2 points," he announced instead of a greeting, his thumbs still moving rapidly across his phone screen. "The Singapore acquisition is looking promising." "Damon," Amara began, her voice soft yet resolute, "I need to talk to you about something important." He glanced up briefly, taking in her serious expression. "Can it wait?" "I have a conference call with Tokyo in 20 minutes. "It's important," she repeated, drawing the ultrasound papers from her pocket. Sighing, he slipped his phone into his jacket pocket and moved to the bar cart, pouring 2 fingers of 18-year-old Macallan. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant," she said, watching his face carefully. His hand paused mid-air, the crystal tumbler catching the light. A flicker of something. Surprise? Concern? Crossed his features before his Wall Street poker face returned. "I see," he said, taking a deliberate sip. "That's unexpected. We should discuss options." "There's more," Amara continued, extending the papers toward him. "It's triplets." The word hung in the air between them. Damon's expression shifted, his mask of control slipping momentarily. He took the papers without touching her fingers, scanning the medical report with the same intensity he applied to quarterly earnings statements. "Triplets?" His voice had cooled several degrees. "This isn't what I had in mind." "I know it's a surprise," Amara began, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "But we have resources, space." "That's not the issue," Damon interrupted, placing the papers on the marble countertop as if they were contaminated. "This is the type of complication I don't need at this point in my career." The coldness in his voice froze Amara where she stood. "Complication? These are our children." Damon pulled out his phone, his thumb scrolling through contacts. "Harrison, it's Damon. I need you to prepare separation papers. Yes, today." He turned away from Amara's shocked expression, speaking in the clipped tones he reserved for business associates. Standard terms, but expedited process. Confidentiality is paramount. Amara felt her world tilting sideways. Damon, what are you doing? He ended the call and faced her, his blue eyes glacial. Being practical, let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. You're ending our marriage because I'm pregnant? Her voice trembled with disbelief. Let's be honest, Amara, he said, loosening his tie slightly. You're not the type of wife the Wellington Enterprises needs long-term. One thing is having a multicultural marriage to appeal to progressive investors. Something entirely different is having 3 mixed-race children appearing in family photos. That alienates the type of client that sustains my empire. Each word fell like acid on Amara's skin. She wrapped her arms protectively around her midsection, as if shielding the tiny lives within from their father's rejection. I was naive thinking you'd understand your role in this arrangement, Damon continued, walking to his office and opening the wall safe with practiced movements. You're too smart to be merely decorative, but too ordinary to be a true partner for someone in my position. He returned with a checkbook, scribbling with the gold Mont Blanc pen she'd given him for their 1-month anniversary. Tearing out the check, he extended it alongside a folder that he must have had prepared previously. $100,000, he stated, as if discussing any mundane transaction. Enough to start over somewhere else and care for these children if you decide to keep them. How can you talk about your own children this way? Amara asked, her voice breaking. They're not my children, Damon replied, checking messages on his phone while speaking. They're a miscalculation I'm correcting before it causes irreparable damage. I want you out of this apartment by tomorrow. Your belongings will be sent wherever you specify. Something shifted inside Amara, a dam breaking, releasing not tears but a flood of dignity she hadn't known she possessed. She took the check from his outstretched hand and tore it into pieces, letting them flutter to the imported Italian marble floor. I don't need your money to raise my children. Damon's eyebrows rose slightly, the first genuine reaction she'd seen. A cold smile played at his lips. Sensible as always. Then I suggest you start looking for apartments compatible with your entry-level administrative assistant salary. Manhattan isn't kind to single mothers without connections. That night, in a modest hotel room paid for with her dwindling savings, Amara cried herself to sleep. Morning light filtered through thin curtains, illuminating her tear-stained face as she packed her small suitcase. Between her folded clothes, she found the torn pieces of Damon's check. For a moment, she considered taping it together and depositing it, the practical choice for someone soon to be responsible for 3 lives, but something deeper stopped her. The same something that had given her strength to walk away from Damon's penthouse with her dignity intact. In the weeks that followed, Amara faced a harsh reality. Nearly 6 months pregnant with triplets, rejected by the Wellington family who now treated her as a gold digger, she found herself unable to secure employment in Manhattan. The Wellington name that had opened doors now firmly closed them. Boston welcomed her back with indifference. She rented a tiny apartment in Dorchester, a working-class neighborhood far from the gleaming towers of financial power. Her Columbia degree secured her an assistant position in Boston Medical Center's administration department, but the salary barely covered rent. Soon she was working weekends as a waitress and giving administration tutoring sessions to college students during evenings. By her 8th month, exhaustion had become Amara's constant companion. Working a double shift at the hospital followed by 3 hours of tutoring, she returned to her apartment and collapsed on the worn carpet, unable to reach the phone as darkness engulfed her. It was her neighbor, retired nurse Patricia Washington, who found her and called the ambulance. In the hospital, the doctor was unequivocal. Complete bed rest was required, or she risked losing the babies. How can I rest when I need to work to support them? Amara asked, not expecting an answer. During those forced weeks of bed rest, with Mrs. Washington checking on her daily, Amara had time to think. She observed the hospital's administrative systems with a professional eye, identifying inefficiencies that, if corrected, could save millions. Ideas began forming, strategies taking shape. In early January 2012, Alexandria, Audrey, and Elijah were born healthy. 3 perfect miracles with caramel-light skin and striking blue eyes, the unmistakable Wellington mark. As she watched them in the nursery, their tiny chests rising and falling in synchronized rhythm, Amara made a promise. One day, we'll return to New York not as Damon Wellington's rejected children, but as heirs to something far greater than he ever built, and he will drown in regret for every word he said. In the solitude of that hospital room, Amara couldn't have imagined that in 12 years she would be standing on stage at a major business event announcing the acquisition of Wellington Enterprises, while Damon watched from the audience, devastated by his belated remorse. The sun had barely risen over the Boston skyline when Amara's phone buzzed with another rejection email. "Thank you for your interest in the senior analyst position at Gardner Financial. Unfortunately," she didn't need to read further. It was her 5th rejection this week, each one following the same pattern. Initial interest in her impressive resume, then sudden withdrawal after the background check revealed her brief marriage to Damon Wellington. Sitting on the edge of her bed in a cheap motel, the 3rd she'd stayed in since leaving Manhattan 2 weeks ago, Amara placed her hand on her growing belly. "They're making it very difficult for us," she whispered to her unborn children. But difficult isn't impossible. Her bank account balance glared at her from the phone screen. $3,412.87. At the current rate, she had perhaps 6 weeks before complete financial collapse. The $100,000 she'd torn up in Damon's penthouse now seemed like a distant dream, a moment of pride she couldn't afford. The next morning, Amara boarded a Greyhound bus to Boston, her childhood home. The journey was tortuous, morning sickness amplified by the swaying vehicle, passengers shifting uncomfortably away from the pregnant woman who periodically rushed to the tiny bathroom. By the time the bus pulled into South Station, her face was pale with exhaustion, her Columbia University sweatshirt damp with sweat. "You need help, miss?" asked the elderly driver as she struggled with her single suitcase. "I'm fine, thank you," she replied automatically, the phrase becoming her mantra over the following weeks. Dorchester welcomed Amara with grim familiarity. The working-class neighborhood where she'd grown up hadn't changed. The same corner stores, the same graffiti-marked walls, the same struggle etched into residents' faces. The apartment she found was small even by Boston standards. A 1-bedroom with peeling paint, temperamental plumbing, and windows that rattled with every passing truck. "It's $900 per month, heat included," said the landlord, eyeing her pregnant form doubtfully. "First, last, and security deposit up front." Amara swallowed hard. "I'll take it." With her remaining funds depleted by the apartment deposits, Amara began her job search with renewed desperation. Her Columbia MBA should have opened doors. Instead, she found them slamming shut the moment her previous employment with Wellington Enterprises surfaced. "Your qualifications are impressive, Ms. Jones," said the HR manager at Boston Financial Group, "but we have a policy against hiring individuals with potential conflicts of interest with major financial institutions." "There's no conflict," Amara insisted. "My connection to Wellington Enterprises is completely severed." The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Nevertheless, we'll keep your resume on file." After 2 weeks of similar interviews, Amara lowered her expectations. The Boston Medical Center needed administrative assistance, a position far below her qualifications, but one that didn't trigger the same red flags as finance jobs. "You're overqualified," noted the hiring manager, a tired-looking woman named Gloria, "but we're short-staffed, and you can start immediately. $19 an hour, benefits after 90 days. The salary wouldn't cover her expenses, but it was a start. That evening, Amara calculated her budget on a notepad, the numbers refusing to cooperate. Rent, utilities, food, prenatal care, and soon 3 infants' needs. The math was merciless. The weekend found her at Harvest Moon Diner, black uniforms strained across her 24-week pregnant belly, taking orders from impatient customers. "Coffee, black, and make it quick," demanded a businessman without looking up from his phone. "Right away, sir," Amara replied, swallowing her Columbia-educated pride. By the end of her first double shift, her ankles had swollen to twice their normal size. She counted her tips on the bus ride home, $67.35. She slipped the cash into an envelope labeled Baby Fund and placed it in her otherwise empty freezer. On Tuesday evenings and Sunday afternoons, Amara tutored business administration students from Northeastern University, charging $30 per hour, less than the university's tutoring center, but enough to attract a steady stream of struggling students. "The way you explain cost accounting makes it actually understandable," remarked one grateful senior. "Have you considered teaching?" Amara smiled tiredly. "Maybe someday." Her calendar on the kitchen wall became a complex system of color-coded shifts, appointments, and payment due dates. Each night she would cross off another day, marking her progression toward her due date with equal parts anticipation and dread. At 28 weeks, Dr. Patel's concern grew visible during Amara's checkup. "Your blood pressure is elevated and you're showing signs of exhaustion. Carrying triplets is extremely demanding. You need to reduce your workload." "I understand," Amara nodded, having no intention of following this advice. Reducing her workload meant reducing her already insufficient income. 2 weeks later, after a particularly grueling Saturday of back-to-back diner shifts, Amara fumbled with her keys at her apartment door. The hallway lights blurred, the floor seemed to tilt, and darkness crept in from the edges of her vision. Her last conscious thought was reaching for her phone as she crumpled to the floor. The harsh, fluorescent hospital lights were the first thing she saw upon waking. Beside her bed sat an unfamiliar older black woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes. "Welcome back, honey," the woman said gently. "I'm Patricia Washington from apartment 3C. Found you in the hallway when I was coming home from church." Amara tried to sit up, panic seizing her. "The babies are just fine for now," came a stern male voice. Dr. Morris, the on-call obstetrician, approached her bed with a clipboard. "But they won't stay that way if you continue pushing yourself to collapse. You need complete bed rest until delivery." "That's impossible," Amara protested. "I have to work." "What you have to do is keep these 3 babies inside you for at least 4 more weeks, Dr. Morris countered. "Every day they stay in is critical for their development." Mrs. Washington patted Amara's hand. "I already called the hospital and the diner, told them you're on medical leave." "But I can't afford—" "Life finds a way," Mrs. Washington interrupted. "I raised 4 children on a nurse's salary after my husband passed. If there's one thing I know, it's that proud women like us need to accept help sometimes." Tears that Amara had been suppressing for months finally broke free. "I don't have anyone." "You do now," Mrs. Washington said simply. The following weeks of mandatory bed rest were both the most frustrating and illuminating of Amara's life. From her bed, with nothing but time on her hands, she began observing the hospital's operations during her frequent checkups. The inefficiencies were glaring: duplicate paperwork, outdated filing systems, communication breakdowns between departments. "Do you know that patients are filling out the same information on 3 different forms?" she asked the nurse during one appointment. "Tell me about it." The nurse rolled her eyes. "Been that way for years." With a notebook salvaged from her tutoring materials, Amara began mapping workflows, identifying bottlenecks, and sketching potential solutions. The more she observed, the more clearly she saw the opportunity. Hospitals were drowning in administrative inefficiency, and no one was addressing it systematically. "What are you always scribbling in that notebook?" Mrs. Washington asked one evening while delivering a homemade dinner. "The beginning of something," Amara replied thoughtfully. "Maybe a way forward." By 36 weeks, Amara's small apartment had transformed. Mrs. Washington had rallied the women from her church, and donations appeared: 3 second-hand cribs, a changing table, bags of newborn clothes, and boxes of diapers. The community's generosity brought Amara to tears again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. "I'll pay everyone back someday," she promised Mrs. Washington. "Just pay it forward when you can," the older woman replied. On January 3, 2012, after 18 hours of labor, Alexandria, Audrey, and Elijah entered the world. Small but healthy, with caramel-light skin and the unmistakable Wellington blue eyes. As Amara held them for the first time, exhausted but triumphant, she made silent promises to each one. "You'll never know rejection like I did," she whispered. "You'll never doubt your worth." 1 week after delivery, while the triplets slept in their donated cribs, Amara composed a letter to the Wellington family, enclosing photos of their grandchildren. She hesitated before sealing the envelope, wondering if she was inviting more pain into her life. After a long moment, she added her return address and dropped it in the mail. 2 weeks later, the unopened envelope returned with a stamp. "Addressee refuses delivery from this sender." Amara stared at the rejection, a familiar coldness settling in her chest. Then, with deliberate movements, she tore the envelope and its contents into pieces, letting them fall into the trash. "They don't deserve to know you," she told the sleeping infants, "and you don't need them." That night, watching her children breathe in peaceful synchrony, Amara returned to her notebook, refining her ideas for hospital administration improvements. The plan was taking shape, not just for survival, but for something much bigger. While her stomach grew with her 3 precious babies, something else was growing in her mind. The blueprint for an empire that would one day make Damon Wellington look like an amateur in business. The January air hung frigid and sharp over Boston as Amara was wheeled into the delivery room, her body convulsing with contractions that came relentlessly every 2 minutes. The bright fluorescent lights made her wince as another wave of pain washed over her. "I can't do this," she gasped, gripping the sides of the bed. "Not 3 of them." Mrs. Washington, who had insisted on being her birth partner, squeezed her hand firmly. "You've already done harder things than this, child. Now breathe like they showed you." 18 hours later, after a marathon of pain that tested the limits of human endurance, Amara heard the first cry, a piercing wail that cut through her exhaustion like a shaft of light. Alexandria came first, tiny but fierce, followed 7 minutes later by Audrey, whose cry was more musical, almost questioning. Elijah arrived last, silent at first, causing a moment of panic before he announced his presence with a powerful, indignant howl. "3 perfect babies," the doctor announced, his face etched with the satisfied fatigue that came with difficult deliveries. 5 pounds each, remarkable for triplets. When the nurses finally placed the swaddled infants in her arms, Amara felt the world stop turning. 3 identical faces, their skin a warm caramel tone, gazed up at her with unfocused eyes. As if coordinated, they blinked simultaneously, revealing identical piercing blue irises, the unmistakable Wellington trademark that had captivated her in Damon's gaze all those months ago. "They have his eyes," she whispered, a complicated emotion swelling in her chest. Mrs. Washington studied the babies' faces. "Maybe so, but they have your spirit. I can see it already." The apartment transformed into a makeshift nursery with 3 second-hand cribs positioned in what had once been Amara's dining area. Donated baby clothes, washed and neatly folded, filled plastic storage bins under her bed. The church ladies had organized a rotation, with someone checking in daily to help with the overwhelming task of caring for 3 newborns while Amara recovered from her C-section. Sleep became a distant memory. The triplets operated on different schedules, ensuring that just as one settled, another would wake demanding attention. Amara adapted with the efficiency that had earned her honors at Columbia, creating a color-coded feeding chart and developing systems to maximize the precious minutes when all 3 babies slept simultaneously. "You don't have to do this alone," Mrs. Washington reminded her one particularly difficult evening when Elijah had been crying inconsolably for hours with colic. "Let me take him for a while. Get some rest. I can't keep depending on everyone's charity." Amara protested weakly, dark circles beneath her eyes. "This isn't charity," Mrs. Washington corrected firmly. "This is community. Someday you'll do the same for someone else." During midnight feedings, Amara would sit in the threadbare armchair by the window, a baby at her breast and her tablet balanced on the armrest, researching hospital management systems and administrative efficiencies. The ideas that had formed during her bed rest were evolving into something more structured, a vision of streamlined healthcare administration that could save millions. At 6 weeks postpartum, earlier than recommended by her doctor, Amara returned to her position at Boston Medical Center, arranging her schedule around Mrs. Washington's availability to watch the triplets. The administrative department welcomed her back with the detached politeness of colleagues who respected her work ethic but maintained professional distance. In the hospital's basement break room, Amara pumped breast milk during her lunch breaks, storing the precious liquid in the communal refrigerator labeled with each baby's name. While the pump whirred rhythmically, she refined her observations about the hospital's inefficient systems, noting redundant paperwork processes and communication breakdowns between departments. "You should focus on your filing, Amara," her supervisor, Mr. Reynolds, advised when he caught her documenting workflow inefficiencies. "These administrative matters are above your pay grade." The dismissal stung, but Amara nodded respectfully. "Of course, Mr. Reynolds. I'll get back to filing immediately." That night, after finally getting all 3 babies to sleep, Amara drafted a formal proposal for streamlining the hospital's intake procedures. The document was comprehensive, professional, and supported by data she'd meticulously gathered. She printed it on high-quality paper purchased with money she could barely spare. 2 days later, she requested a meeting with her department head. "I've identified several ways we could improve our administrative efficiency," she explained, sliding the proposal across the desk. "These changes could reduce processing time by approximately 30%. Mr. Reynolds glanced at the document, his expression unchanging. "Ms. Jones, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you should focus on the responsibilities of your position. Administrative systems are handled by consultants with specialized training. I have an MBA from Columbia with a focus on systems optimization," Amara reminded him quietly. "And yet you're working as an administrative assistant," he replied, sliding the proposal back. "There must be a reason for that. Focus on your current duties, Ms. Jones. Leave the management to those hired for it." The rejection echoed Damon's dismissal, the same undercurrent of, "You don't belong at this level." Amara accepted the returned proposal with outward composure, though her hands trembled slightly. "Thank you for your time," she said, her dignity intact. The triplets grew rapidly, developing distinct personalities despite their identical beginnings. At 4 months, Alexandria revealed herself as the observer, watching everything with intense concentration. Audrey was perpetually content, smiling at shadows and cooing at ceiling fans. Elijah, the most demanding, required constant stimulation, howling with frustration when left alone for even moments. During their 6-month checkup, the pediatrician remarked on their development. "They're hitting all milestones on schedule, which is impressive for multiples," Dr. Chen noted. "You're doing an extraordinary job, Ms. Jones." "Thank you," Amara replied, the rare praise washing over her like a balm. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing anything right." "3 healthy, thriving babies say you are," Dr. Chen assured her. That evening, as Amara bathed the triplets in the kitchen sink, a choreographed routine she'd perfected through trial and error, she studied their features. Damon's eyes looked back at her from 3 different expressions: Alexandria's serious gaze, Audrey's joyful sparkle, Elijah's demanding stare. "Your father had the world at his fingertips," she told them softly, "but he couldn't recognize his greatest treasure when it was offered to him." The following day, while organizing patient files, Amara overheard 2 administrators discussing a critical problem with insurance claim processing. "We're losing almost 20% of claims to errors," said the financial director. "The consultants want another 100,000 to fix it." That night, Amara revised her proposal, focusing specifically on the insurance claim process. This time, she didn't seek permission. During her lunch breaks, she implemented small changes in her own workflow, carefully documenting the results. Within 3 weeks, her processing error rate dropped from 18% to 3%. When the quarterly department review came around, the anomaly couldn't be ignored. "Jones's numbers are significantly better than anyone else's," noted the assistant director during the staff meeting. "What are you doing differently?" Amara was prepared. "I developed a modified verification protocol," she explained, distributing copies of her documentation. "It adds 45 seconds to initial processing but reduces correction time by 83%. The room fell silent as the administrators reviewed her data. "Why didn't you bring this up before?" Mr. Reynolds asked, a hint of defensiveness in his tone. "I did," Amara replied simply. 3 months ago. 2 weeks later, Amara was invited to present her ideas to the department heads. Standing before hospital administrators, many with decades more experience, she outlined her comprehensive approach to administrative streamlining with the confidence that had once made her a standout at Columbia. Implementation would require minimal disruption to current workflows, she concluded, with potential savings of approximately 30% in administrative costs over the first year. The skepticism was palpable, but the financial director asked the question that opened the door. "And you developed this system while working as an entry-level administrative assistant?" "I developed it while watching 3 distinct departments duplicate efforts and waste resources," Amara corrected politely. "My position gave me unique visibility into inefficiencies that might not be apparent from a management perspective." That night, in a moment of emotional weakness, Amara composed a letter to the Wellington family. She enclosed professional photographs of the triplets at 6 months, their matching blue eyes impossible to deny. The letter was factual, devoid of accusations or pleas, simply informing them of their grandchildren's existence and health. 1 week later, the unopened envelope returned, stamped, "Addressee refuses delivery from this sender." Amara stared at the rejection for a long moment before methodically tearing both envelope and photographs into tiny pieces. "They don't deserve to know you," she whispered to the babies playing on a blanket nearby. That night, sitting between the 3 cribs in the dimly lit apartment, Amara watched her children sleep. Alexandria with her thumb in her mouth, Audrey with arms flung wide as if embracing the world, Elijah curled tightly around his favorite blanket. "One day," she promised softly, "you'll return to New York not as the rejected children of Damon Wellington, but as heirs to something much greater than he ever built, and he will drown in the regret of every word he said." What Amara couldn't know as she kissed her children's foreheads was that in just 3 years, her unique understanding of hospital systems would attract the attention of investors who would see in her not the abandoned single mother, but the visionary who would revolutionize American healthcare management. The Boston Medical Center boardroom fell silent as the last slide of Amara's presentation disappeared from the projection screen. 12 hospital administrators sat motionless, processing the data they'd just seen, numbers that couldn't be ignored. "To summarize," said the chief financial officer, breaking the silence, "Ms. Jones's system has reduced administrative processing time by 27% in the pilot department, with projected annual savings of $3.2 million if implemented hospital-wide." Amara stood at the head of the table, her posture perfect, despite having been awake since 4 that morning with a feverish Elijah. Her discount store blazer was immaculately pressed, her natural hair styled simply but professionally. "The numbers speak for themselves," she concluded confidently. "The question is whether Boston Medical Center wants to be the first to implement this system, or if you'd prefer watching another hospital reap the benefits while you continue losing millions to administrative inefficiency." 2 weeks later, Amara's system was approved for hospital-wide implementation. The day the board signed off on her proposal, she walked home with tears streaming down her face. Not from sadness, but from vindication. The system that Mr. Reynolds had dismissed as above her pay grade would now save the hospital millions. By early 2014, Amara's reputation spread throughout Boston's medical community. Her efficiency system had exceeded projections, saving the hospital nearly $4 million in its first year. When neighboring hospitals sent representatives to observe the system, Amara was the one who conducted the tours, explaining the intricate workflows she'd designed. "You should be charging consultation fees," remarked Dr. Patel during one of the triplets' checkups. "Other hospitals are implementing your methods while you're still making what? $22 an hour?" Amara adjusted Alexandria on her lap, wiping applesauce from the toddler's chin. 23 after my performance review. But you're right. I've been thinking about next steps." The triplets were now 2 years old, walking with the determined waddle of toddlers discovering their independence. Alexandria spoke in complete sentences, her vocabulary astonishing daycare teachers. Audrey hummed constantly, creating melodies that seemed too complex for a child her age. Elijah dismantled his toys methodically, more interested in how things worked than in playing with them as intended. Balancing work and motherhood was a perpetual challenge. Amara's apartment walls were covered with schedules, developmental milestone charts, and educational activities. She slept 4 hours a night, using the precious time after the triplets' bedtime to research business models and entrepreneurial strategies. On a rainy April morning in 2014, Amara sat at her kitchen table surrounded by spreadsheets and business plan drafts. The triplets played in their gated area nearby, Elijah stacking blocks while his sisters engaged in parallel play with picture books. "What do you think, little ones? Should Mommy start her own company?" she asked, not expecting a response. "Yes, Mommy," Alexandria answered seriously, looking up from her book. "Make big office." Amara laughed, momentarily startled by her daughter's comprehension. "From your lips to God's ears, Alexandria." The following week, Amara scheduled a meeting with the Boston Minority Business Development Agency. Dressed in her best outfit, a navy suit purchased from a consignment shop but tailored to fit perfectly, she presented her business plan with the same confidence she'd shown in the hospital boardroom. "Your concept is solid," said Ms. Rivera, the loan officer, "but entrepreneurship is risky, especially for a single mother with 3 young children. Have you considered the personal financial impact if this fails?" "I've calculated every scenario," Amara replied, sliding across a detailed risk assessment. "Including the worst case, my fallback position is secured by my expertise in hospital administration, but this won't fail." Ms. Rivera studied her for a long moment. "Most applicants say that. Few convince me like you just did." 1 month later, Amara received approval for a small business loan through the Minority Enterprise Program, $75,000 to launch Jones Healthcare Solutions. The amount was modest by industry standards, barely enough for basic equipment and 3 months of operating expenses. But for Amara, it represented possibility. The day she received the funds, Amara sat the triplets down for a serious conversation. At 3 years old, they watched her with matching blue eyes, their expressions varying from Alexandria's intensity to Audrey's gentle curiosity to Elijah's impatient intelligence. "Mommy is starting a business," she explained, using the simple language she knew they could understand. "It means I'll be working very hard, sometimes at night when you're sleeping. But everything I do is for us, for our future." "Will you make money, Mommy?" asked Elijah, already grasping financial concepts beyond his years. "If we work hard and are smart about it, yes," Amara answered honestly. "Then you can buy me a robot," he stated matter-of-factly. In June 2014, Jones Healthcare Solutions officially launched from Amara's living room. Her dining table became a desk, hosting a refurbished laptop and a printer purchased on installment. While the triplets slept, Amara worked through the night, coding the prototype for her hospital management software. The living room corner became her improvised office with file folders organized meticulously on a second-hand bookshelf. During daycare holidays, the triplets played quietly nearby, somehow understanding the importance of Mommy's work even at their young age. One evening, as Amara worked on database architecture, she felt a presence at her elbow. Elijah stood watching her screen, his blue eyes tracking the lines of code with unexpected focus. "What's that?" he asked, pointing to a function she'd just written. "That's a way to help computers talk to each other," Amara explained simply. Elijah nodded solemnly. "I want to do that too, Mommy." She lifted him onto her lap, guiding his tiny hand over the mouse. "Maybe someday you will." As summer turned to fall, Amara scheduled her first presentation with a potential client, the Dorchester Community Health Center, a small facility serving lower-income patients. The night before the meeting, disaster struck. Her regular babysitter called with the flu. "I can't miss this meeting," Amara told Mrs. Washington desperately. "It's our first potential client." "Then take them with you," Mrs. Washington suggested pragmatically. "They're well-behaved children. Pack plenty of quiet activities." The next morning, Amara arrived at the health center with 3 impeccably dressed toddlers, a bag of silent toys, and more anxiety than she'd felt presenting to the hospital board. The clinic director raised an eyebrow at the children but said nothing as they settled in a corner with coloring books. Throughout the presentation, Amara maintained perfect composure, outlining how her system could reduce the clinic's administrative costs by 25%. The triplets, sensing the importance of the moment, colored quietly, occasionally looking up to watch their mother with unmistakable pride. "Your system is impressive," said Dr. Thompson, the clinic director, "but I have to ask, how do you manage to develop sophisticated software while raising triplets alone?" "The same way I'll deliver excellent service to your clinic," Amara replied without hesitation. "Efficiency, dedication, and an understanding that failure isn't an option." 2 days later, the clinic signed a contract, Jones Healthcare Solutions' first client. That evening, Amara splurged on pizza delivery, setting up an impromptu celebration at their small dining table. "We're celebrating because Mommy's company got its first customer today," she explained to the triplets, who were delighted by the unexpected treat. "Is that good?" asked Alexandria, always the one to seek understanding. "It's very good," Amara confirmed. "It means we're building something important." As they ate, Elijah looked up suddenly. "Mommy, James at daycare says everyone has a daddy. Where is our daddy?" The question Amara had been dreading hung in the air. She put down her pizza slice, choosing her words carefully. "Your father lives far away," she said finally. "He can't be with us, but we 4 are a complete family just as we are." "Does he love us?" Audrey asked, her voice small. Amara pulled her daughter close. "Some people don't know how to love properly. That's not your fault. It's theirs." Later that night, after tucking the triplets into bed, Amara sat at her computer, staring at the email that had arrived during dinner. The director of operations at Boston Memorial Hospital had heard about her system from colleagues at the community clinic and wanted to discuss implementation at their 200-bed facility. With trembling fingers, she scheduled the meeting for the following week. Before closing her laptop, she allowed herself a moment of weakness, typing Damon Wellington's name into a search engine. The results showed him at a charity gala, his arm around a blonde woman with aristocratic features. The caption identified her as Wellington's fiancée, socialite Victoria Cavendish. Amara closed the browser quickly, refusing to let the past distract her from the future she was building. The next morning, she returned to the bank, this time with a signed contract in hand, requesting additional financing to expand her operation. 2 months later, Amara signed the lease on a small office space in a modest building near the medical district. The room was barely 200 square feet, with industrial carpeting and fluorescent lighting, but it represented a significant milestone. On her desk, she placed a single photograph, the triplets on their 3rd birthday, 3 identical smiles beaming at the camera. While Amara unpacked her business cards with the new office address, Damon Wellington was signing papers in Manhattan for a merger that promised to double his fortune. unaware that the woman he had discarded was quietly building the company that would one day absorb his own. The small office that once seemed like a monumental achievement now felt cramped as Amara led her team of 12 employees through their weekly strategy meeting. Whiteboards covered with flowcharts and projections lined the walls, while developers huddled around shared desks, coding the next iteration of the Jones Healthcare Solutions system. The Massachusetts General implementation goes live next week, Amara announced, unable to keep the pride from her voice. This is our biggest milestone yet. MGH isn't just any hospital. It's a Harvard teaching institution with international recognition. Her operations director, Layla Chen, nodded in agreement. If we succeed there, every hospital in New England will be calling. When we succeed, Amara corrected gently, not if. April 2017 marked a turning point for Jones Healthcare Solutions. The Massachusetts General Hospital, Boston's flagship medical institution, had signed a contract to implement Amara's system hospital-wide after their pilot program showed 32% reduction in administrative errors and 28% cost savings. After the meeting, Amara retreated to her small private office, really just a glass-walled corner of the main space, and allowed herself a moment of quiet celebration. At 32, she had built a company that now employed 12 people and was on track to break $1 million in revenue this year. The $75,000 loan that had seemed so significant 3 years ago had been repaid in full, and the business was now self-sustaining. Her phone chimed with a reminder. Alexandria and Audrey's music lessons ended in 30 minutes. Amara quickly gathered her things, the practiced efficiency of a working mother evident in her movements. The triplets were now 5, attending kindergarten at Brookline Academy on partial scholarships awarded for their exceptional abilities. The prestigious private school had initially offered only one scholarship, until Amara firmly explained that separating the triplets wasn't an option. Impressed by her advocacy and the children's test scores, the school had found additional scholarship funds. At the Boston Children's Chorus building, Amara arrived just as the beginner's music class was ending. Through the observation window, she watched Alexandria draw her small bow across the quarter-sized violin with intense concentration, while Audrey's fingers moved confidently across piano keys, their blue eyes narrowed in identical expressions of focus. "They're extraordinary," whispered the music teacher, joining Amara at the window. "Alexandria has perfect pitch, and Audrey's sense of rhythm is uncanny for a 5-year-old. Have they been exposed to music from an early age?" "Just what I could provide," Amara answered, thinking of the second-hand keyboard and thrift store violin she'd purchased when the twins showed interest in music. Their abilities seem innate. After collecting the girls, Amara hurried to Brookline Academy where Elijah was finishing his advanced mathematics enrichment program. She found him at the whiteboard, solving equations alongside children 2 grades ahead. "Mom, look!" he called excitedly when he spotted her. "Ms. Petrovich says I can join the robotics club even though I'm only in kindergarten." The ride home was filled with the children's chatter, Alexandria describing the new piece she was learning, Audrey singing softly to herself, and Elijah explaining a mathematical concept with enthusiasm that made Amara smile despite her exhaustion. Their apartment, while still in Dorchester, was a significant upgrade from the tiny 1-bedroom where they'd started. The 2-bedroom unit in a secure building featured large windows, functional appliances, and a small balcony where Amara had created a container garden. The triplets shared the master bedroom, transformed into a carefully organized space with 3 beds, 3 desks, and color-coded storage for their belongings. Mrs. Washington visited regularly, now more family than neighbor. That evening, she arrived with a homemade casserole and news from the old building. "The church is organizing a school supply drive," she announced while helping serve dinner. "I told them about your company. They're very proud of you, you know." Amara smiled warmly. "I wouldn't be here without your help in those early days." "Nonsense," Mrs. Washington waved dismissively. "You would have found a way. You always do." After the children were bathed and in bed, Amara settled at her laptop at the kitchen table, reviewing the implementation plan for Massachusetts General. The work was consuming but deeply satisfying. Her system, refined through each new installation, was becoming the gold standard in hospital administration efficiency. She allowed herself to imagine what this contract could mean: financial stability, perhaps enough to finally purchase a small home where each child could have their own space. The thought of providing that security for her children fueled her through another late night of work. The Massachusetts General implementation exceeded all expectations. Within 6 months, 5 more major hospitals in the New England area had signed contracts with Jones Healthcare Solutions. By the end of 2018, Amara's company had grown to 50 employees and moved to larger offices in a renovated industrial building near the South Boston waterfront. Success brought new challenges. Amara now managed a growing team while maintaining her hands-on approach to system design and client relationships. The triplets, thriving academically and in their extracurricular pursuits, required attentive parenting to ensure their exceptional abilities developed healthily. In August 2018, Amara closed the purchase on a modest townhouse in a safe neighborhood with excellent public schools. The children, now 6, explored their new home with excitement, marveling at having a backyard, however small. "Do we each get our own room?" Elijah asked, calculating the bedroom count. "Not yet," Amara explained. "You and your sisters will share the larger bedroom upstairs. The small bedroom will be my office, and I'll take the bedroom downstairs." Though she could technically afford a larger home, Amara continued to live frugally, reinvesting most profits back into the company. Her salary, while comfortable, reflected her prioritization of long-term growth over immediate comfort. The only true luxuries she allowed were educational opportunities for the children and occasional family trips to museums and cultural events. The triplets' first-grade teacher requested a special meeting in October, which Amara attended with trepidation, worried something was wrong. "Mrs. Jones," "Ms." Amara corrected gently. "Ms. Jones," the teacher continued, "I've been teaching for 20 years, and I've never encountered children like yours. They're not just bright, they're exceptional. Alexandria's reading comprehension is at a 5th-grade level. Audrey's artistic and musical abilities are extraordinary. And Elijah solved a math problem yesterday that I had to ask the middle school teacher about." Amara nodded, having observed these abilities developing at home. "What do you recommend?" "Acceleration in their areas of strength, enrichment programs, possibly even separate classrooms to allow each to develop at their own pace." "They stay together," Amara stated firmly. "They can have different enrichment activities, but they remain in the same core classroom. They draw strength from each other." One rainy afternoon in November, while waiting for a doctor's appointment for Audrey's seasonal allergies, Amara absently flipped through a business magazine in the waiting room. Her heart stuttered when she encountered a familiar face. Damon Wellington, photographed at a charity gala, a blonde woman in an elegant gown on his arm. The caption read, "Wellington Enterprises CEO Damon Wellington and wife Victoria Cavendish Wellington at the Metropolitan Museum Gala, their first public appearance since their spring wedding." Amara studied the image, noting the practiced smile that didn't reach Damon's eyes, the possessive way his new wife clutched his arm. The article briefly mentioned this being his first marriage, erasing Amara completely from his history. For a moment, old pain threatened to surface. Then Audrey emerged from the examination room, holding the nurse's hand and chatting happily about the stickers she'd received for being brave during her allergy test. Amara closed the magazine decisively and stood to embrace her daughter. The past belonged in the past. That evening, after the children were asleep, Amara updated her 5-year business plan. The goals were ambitious: expansion beyond New England, development of specialized modules for different medical specialties, and eventually, entry into the competitive New York healthcare market. Each milestone was carefully calculated, each projection based on conservative estimates. The final page included a personal note. Potential NYC office location by 2023. Alexandria, Audrey, and Elijah will be 11, old enough to understand the significance of our return. In the quiet of her small home office, surrounded by the evidence of the life she'd built from nothing, Amara allowed herself to imagine the future she was creating. Not just the business success, but the moment her children would walk confidently through Manhattan, not as Damon Wellington's rejected offspring, but as the accomplished heirs to the empire their mother had built. While Amara closed the deal that would take her company beyond New England's borders, she had no way of knowing that in New York, Wellington Enterprises was beginning to experience the first signs of the crisis that would eventually place it on a collision course with her past. The Jones Healthcare Solutions headquarters gleamed in the morning sunlight, the modest sign at the entrance belying the company's growing influence in the healthcare industry. Amara's heels clicked purposefully across the polished concrete floor as she made her way to the conference room where her executive team awaited. At 36, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had built something substantial from nothing. "Our valuation just passed $500 million, she announced, unable to keep a hint of pride from her voice as she placed her tablet on the conference table. "And we've crossed the 300-employee mark as of this morning's new hires." Her team, now comprising seasoned executives poached from larger healthcare companies, broke into applause. Layla Chen, who had been with Amara since the early days, raised her coffee mug in a toast. "To the woman who said we'd reach this milestone by 2020, and not a day later." Later that afternoon, Amara conducted a video conference with potential partners in Toronto, discussing the company's first international expansion. The Canadian healthcare administrators nodded appreciatively as she outlined how the Jones system could be adapted to their provincial requirements. "We've increased efficiency by an average of 34% in our American implementations," Amara explained, scrolling through case studies on her presentation. "There's no reason we can't achieve similar results within the Canadian system." As the meeting concluded successfully, Amara checked her watch. Just enough time to reach Jordan Hall before the Boston Youth Orchestra's performance began. She texted her driver while gathering her things, prioritizing as she always did. Business completed efficiently to make space for her children's milestones. The concert hall hummed with anticipation as parents and supporters filled the seats. Amara slipped into her reserved front-row spot just as the lights dimmed. The conductor appeared, followed by the young musicians in formal attire. Among them walked Alexandria and Audrey Jones, now 8 years old, carrying a violin and taking a seat at the piano respectively. Despite being the youngest performers by several years, the twins showed no sign of nervousness. When the music began, Alexandria's bow moved across the strings with precision that belied her age, while Audrey's fingers danced across the keys with natural fluidity. Adult musicians in the orchestra occasionally glanced at the girls with barely concealed amazement. From her seat, Amara recorded short clips on her phone, her chest tight with emotion. These were not just talented children. These were her children who had started life under the shadow of rejection, but now shone in their own light. The following weekend found Amara in an auditorium at MIT, watching Elijah compete in the National Mathematics Olympiad against students 3 and 4 years his senior. His small frame nearly disappeared behind the podium as he explained his approach to a differential equation that had stumped competitors twice his age. "The conventional approach creates unnecessary steps," he explained with the same confidence his mother displayed in boardrooms. "By reframing the problem using Taylor series approximation, we can reach the solution with greater efficiency." The judges exchanged impressed glances. When the results were announced, Elijah had secured first place, accepting the trophy with a small, serious smile that mirrored Amara's own expression during business negotiations. "Are you sure he's only 8? Asked one of the other parents as Amara congratulated her son. 8.5, she corrected with a smile. "He'd want me to be precise." As the triplets' profiles rose in their respective fields, Amara found herself declining media requests with increasing frequency. A regional business magazine wanted to feature her as Boston's most impressive working mother. The Boston Globe education section requested an interview about raising gifted children. A parenting podcast sought her insights on balancing career success with child rearing. "I appreciate your interest," she wrote in each polite rejection, "but I prefer to keep my children's lives private while they're still developing their identities." The real reason ran deeper. Every public appearance carried the risk of information reaching Damon. Photographs of 3 children with unmistakable Wellington eyes making headlines in circles he might monitor. Though the triplets had asked occasional questions about their father over the years, Amara had managed to protect them from the full truth of his rejection. She wasn't ready for that bubble to burst before they had developed the emotional foundation to process it. One Tuesday evening, as Amara helped the children with homework at their dining table, Elijah frowned at an assignment sheet. "Mom, we're doing a family heritage project. We need to complete a family tree going back 3 generations." Amara's hands stilled on the pasta she was serving. "That sounds interesting. We can fill in what we know about my side of the family." "But what about our father's side?" Alexandria asked, looking up from her history textbook. "James said everyone needs both sides to complete the project properly." "I'll speak with your teacher," Amara replied, her tone gentle but final. "Some families have different structures, and your project can reflect our family as it is." That night, after the children were asleep, Amara found herself unable to rest. The family tree project had stirred something that had been quietly settling like sediment at the bottom of her life. She knew this day would eventually come, when simple answers about an absent father would no longer suffice. The next morning, Elijah appeared at her bedroom door, an unfamiliar folder in his hands and an expression of confused determination on his face. "Mom, I found this when I was looking for old pictures for my project." He held out a manila folder containing documents Amara had kept secured in her home office. Her heart sank as she recognized the folder, containing her marriage certificate and divorce papers, documents she'd preserved as proof should it ever be needed. She'd been so careful to keep them locked away, but had underestimated Elijah's resourcefulness. "I saw the name Wellington," he continued, his blue eyes, so like his father's, searching her face. "Mom, why is our last name Jones and not Wellington like our father?" Amara patted the bed beside her, taking a deep breath. "Come sit down, Elijah." When he was settled next to her, she chose her words carefully. "Wellington is your father's last name, yes, but Jones is the name of the family that has loved and supported you since your first day." "But why don't we have his name? Every other kid at school has their dad's last name, even if their parents are divorced." "Because Jones is the name of the family that matters. The family that was there for every birthday, every fever, every milestone." She stroked his hair gently. "Some people aren't ready to be parents when the opportunity comes. Your father wasn't ready." "Will we ever meet him?" Elijah asked, his analytical mind already connecting dots. "That's something we might discuss when you're older. For now, know that our family is complete just as it is." Later that evening, Amara gathered all 3 children in the living room. Alexandria and Audrey sat close together on the sofa, while Elijah perched on the armchair, all 3 watching her with identical blue eyes that never failed to cause a small pang in her heart. "Elijah found some papers today that raised questions about your father," she began directly. "I think it's time we talk about this together." "Is he a bad person?" Audrey asked quietly. "Is that why he doesn't visit us?" "He's not a bad person," Amara answered carefully. "He's someone who made choices based on what he wanted in his life, and those choices didn't include being a father." "Didn't he love us?" Alexandria's question cut straight to the heart of the matter. Amara moved to kneel before her daughter, taking her small hands. "Some people don't know how to love properly. That doesn't reflect on you. It reflects on them. You 3 are absolutely lovable, remarkable, and worthy of all the love in the world. That night, after answering their questions with age-appropriate honesty, Amara sat at her computer and did something she rarely allowed herself. She searched for current information on Damon Wellington. The financial news sites revealed concerning headlines: Wellington Enterprises faces downturn after cryptocurrency gamble, and analysts question Wellington's leadership after third quarterly loss. She closed the browser quickly, refusing to let curiosity about his troubles distract her from her path. However, the knowledge that his empire might be faltering while hers grew stronger provided a quiet satisfaction she didn't articulate even to herself. The triplets' 8th birthday celebration that weekend was a joyful affair in their backyard. Mrs. Washington arrived with a homemade cake, and a small group of carefully selected friends from school played games organized by a children's party service, the one extravagance Amara allowed for the occasion. As she watched the three blow out their candles in perfect synchronization, Alexandria decisive, Audrey gentle, Elijah precise, Amara felt a wave of emotion so powerful it momentarily blurred her vision. They had grown into remarkable children without their father, surrounded instead by a community of love she had carefully cultivated. What Amara couldn't predict while protecting her children from painful questions about their past was that, within 3 years, they would be face to face with the man who had rejected them, in a confrontation that would forever change the power balance between the Jones and Wellington families. The glass and steel skyscraper housing Jones Healthcare Solutions headquarters stood prominently in Boston's financial district, its modern architecture a testament to the company's forward-thinking approach. On the 32nd floor, Amara Jones stood by the panoramic window of her executive office, gazing at the city skyline while finalizing details on her tablet for the acquisition that would transform her company into the largest healthcare management system provider on the East Coast. The board unanimously approved the final offer, announced Layla Chen, now Chief Operations Officer, as she entered the spacious office carrying a leather portfolio. Northeastern Medical Systems has accepted our terms. When this closes next month, we'll be providing services to 67% of all hospitals in New England. Amara nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. At 39, she carried herself with the poise of someone who had conquered insurmountable odds. Her tailored Armani suit and understated yet expensive jewelry reflected her success without ostentation, a stark contrast to the threadbare blazer she'd worn to her first business loan meeting over a decade ago. "Prepare the integration team," Amara instructed, setting down her tablet. "I want this transition to be seamless for their client hospitals. The last thing patients need is administrative disruption because of our corporate moves." The intercom buzzed. "Ms. Jones, your children's school is online too." Amara immediately picked up the phone, her business demeanor softening. "This is Amara Jones." "Ms. Jones, this is Principal Harrington from Brookline Academy. Nothing to worry about. I'm calling because Alexandria and Audrey have been invited to perform with the Boston Symphony Orchestra for their Young Artists Showcase next month. It's quite unprecedented for 11-year-olds. Pride swelled in Amara's chest. "That's wonderful news. Please tell their music director we're honored." After finishing the call, Amara checked her watch, an elegant Patek Philippe that had been her one significant personal indulgence when the company valuation crossed $1 billion. She had just enough time to review the Forbes Business Summit invitation before her next meeting. The email from Forbes was straightforward. They wanted her as the keynote speaker at their prestigious annual summit in Boston next month. The subject line read, "Celebrating America's most innovative healthcare revolutionary." 10 years ago, such recognition would have seemed impossible for a single mother struggling to feed her triplets in a Dorchester apartment. "Mom, look what I did!" Elijah's excited voice filled the kitchen that evening as he burst through the door of their Back Bay townhouse, waving a laptop. At 11, he had grown into a lanky boy whose features increasingly mirrored his absent father's, though his enthusiasm and warmth were entirely his own. Alexandria and Audrey followed more sedately, their violin and music folders tucked neatly under their arms. Though identical in appearance, their personalities had diverged. Alexandria serious and focused, Audrey gentle and intuitive. I created an algorithm that can predict patient routing efficiency based on historical admission patterns, Elijah continued, opening his laptop on the kitchen island. It could improve your system's resource allocation by another 15%. Amara leaned over to examine his work, genuinely impressed by the elegant coding. This is remarkable, Elijah. Would you like to present this to our development team tomorrow? His face lit up. Really? You think it's good enough? It's not just good, it's innovative, she affirmed, ruffling his hair. You've identified a pattern our senior developers missed. Later that night, after helping Alexandria practice a particularly challenging violin concerto and listening to Audrey's latest piano composition, Amara sat at her home office desk reviewing the financial reports of Jones Healthcare Solutions. The company, now valued at $3.7 billion, operated in 38 states, with pilot programs launching in Toronto and London. Her phone buzzed with a text from her public relations director. Fortune just confirmed, you're number 12 on this year's 50 Most Powerful Women in Business list. Wall Street Journal feature interviews scheduled for next Tuesday. Amara allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, remembering Damon's dismissive words all those years ago. You're too smart to be merely decorative, but too ordinary to be a true partner for someone in my position. How wrong he had been about her potential. The following morning, as Amara prepared for an executive board meeting, her assistant interrupted with an unusual message. The Wall Street Journal reporter asked if you'd care to comment on Wellington Enterprises' situation for the feature article. Apparently, they're facing significant difficulties after failed cryptocurrency investments. Amara paused, surprised by the mention of Damon's company. What kind of difficulties? Their market value has dropped 90% in 3 years. Rumors of potential bankruptcy. The reporter thought you might have insights given your previous connection. Tell him I have no comment on Wellington Enterprises, Amara replied firmly. Our feature should focus on Jones Healthcare Solutions innovations, not industry gossip. After the assistant left, Amara allowed herself a quick search on her tablet. The results confirmed her assistant's summary. Wellington Enterprises had made a series of catastrophic investments in volatile cryptocurrency markets, followed by failed attempts to diversify into consumer electronics. The company, once valued at over $2 billion, was now worth barely $200 million. A photo accompanied one article, Damon at a shareholders' meeting, his formerly confident posture now defensive, new lines etched around his eyes, his tailored suit no longer fitting quite as perfectly as it once had. For a brief moment, Amara felt an unexpected twinge of emotion she couldn't immediately identify. Not pity, certainly not satisfaction, perhaps simply the recognition of how completely their paths had diverged. The weekend brought a welcome respite from business concerns as Amara focused on the triplets. Alexandria and Audrey were preparing for their symphony performance, while Elijah worked on refinements to his algorithm. As they ate breakfast together, Amara broached the subject of the upcoming Forbes summit. I'd like you three to attend with me, she said, watching their reactions carefully. You're old enough now for this kind of professional event, and I think it's important for you to see this aspect of what we've built together. Will we have to talk to people? Alexandria asked, always practical about social expectations. Only if you're comfortable, Amara assured her. But yes, there will be many business leaders interested in meeting you. Will we wear fancy clothes? Audrey's eyes lit up at the prospect. The fanciest, Amara smiled. We'll go shopping next weekend. While helping Alexandria adjust the formal dress they'd selected for the event, a midnight blue Valentino that complemented her developing figure while remaining age-appropriate, Amara found herself reflecting on their journey. I'm nervous, Mom, Alexandria admitted, smoothing the fabric with slender fingers. There will be so many important people watching our presentation. Remember what I always say. We don't need validation from anyone but ourselves, Amara replied, adjusting the pearl necklace around her daughter's neck, a gift for her 10th birthday. You three are my greatest success, far above any business or recognition. The Forbes Summit preparation consumed the following weeks. Amara worked late into the nights finalizing her presentation while ensuring the triplets were prepared for their role demonstrating the company's new patient navigation application. The presentation title reflected her journey, Transforming Rejection into Revolution: How Adversity Shaped a New Business Model in Healthcare. 2 days before the event, as Amara reviewed the final attendee list sent by the organizers, a name near the bottom made her freeze. Damon Wellington, CEO, Wellington Enterprises. "Is everything okay, Ms. Jones?" asked her assistant, noticing her sudden stillness. "Yes," Amara replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Just noticed a last-minute addition." That evening she sat the triplets down for a conversation she'd hoped to postpone until they were older. "There's something you should know about the summit," she began carefully. "Your biological father will be attending." 3 identical pairs of blue eyes widened in synchrony. "Will he talk to us?" Elijah asked, his analytical mind immediately assessing the situation. "I don't know," Amara answered honestly. "He may not approach us at all, but I wanted you to be prepared in case he does." "Will you be okay seeing him?" Audrey asked perceptively, always attuned to others' emotions. Amara smiled, touched by her daughter's concern. "I'll be perfectly fine. This is a professional event, and we'll handle it professionally." Later that night, while the triplets slept, Amara finalized her presentation, the significance of the moment not lost on her. The title slide captured everything: Transforming Rejection into Revolution: How Adversity Shaped a New Business Model in Healthcare. What she didn't know was that among the confirmed last-minute participants was Damon Wellington, desperate for new investors to save his company from the brink of bankruptcy. The morning of the Forbes Business Summit dawned crisp and bright over Boston, sunlight glinting off the Ritz-Carlton's imposing facade as a stream of luxury vehicles deposited attendees at the entrance. Inside the Jones family's Back Bay townhouse, a different kind of orchestrated precision unfolded. "Alexandria, your pearl earrings are on the vanity," Amara called from the hallway, fastening her own sapphire earrings that matched her Dior dress, a strategic choice that emphasized her eyes, the one feature she and Damon had never shared. Alexandria stood before the mirror, fingers trembling slightly as she secured the pearls. "What if I forget what to say during the demonstration?" "You won't," Amara assured her, stepping into the room. "You've practiced until it's second nature. Remember, you're not performing, you're simply showing what you already know." In the adjacent bathroom, Audrey smoothed her white dress with careful hands, while Elijah struggled with his tie in his bedroom, muttering equations under his breath, his way of managing nervousness. "Let me help," Amara said, entering his room. As she adjusted the silk Windsor knot, she studied her son's reflection. At 11, his features had sharpened, the Wellington genes increasingly evident in the set of his jaw and the intensity of his gaze. "Mom," Elijah spoke suddenly, "what does our father look like now? Will we recognize him?" Amara's hands stilled momentarily. "You might. He has your eyes." After a beat, she added, "But remember, you are not defined by that connection. You're Joneses, defined by what you've built, not by what was withheld from you." The limousine arrived precisely at 9. As they descended the townhouse steps, a photographer from the Boston Business Journal captured their departure, the successful CEO and her remarkably poised children, a family portrait of achievement against odds. "Ms. Jones, any comment on your keynote address today?" called the journalist from behind the camera. "I believe the work speaks for itself," Amara replied with practiced composure, ushering the children into the waiting vehicle. Across town, In a considerably less luxurious hotel room, Damon Wellington stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. At 47, new lines etched his once confident face, and premature gray streaked his temples. His Armani suit, though still expensive, came from 3 seasons ago, a small detail that wouldn't escape notice in the cutthroat world of finance where appearances signaled success or failure. "Last chance," he muttered to himself, straightening his tie. The Forbes Summit represented his final opportunity to attract new investors before Wellington Enterprises faced the humiliation of Chapter 11. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. "Attendance confirmation. All major investment firms will be present. Good luck." Damon swallowed the last of his coffee and grabbed his presentation materials. The irony wasn't lost on him, begging for capital at an event where he'd once been the sought-after speaker. Pride still prevented him from admitting how completely his cryptocurrency gamble had backfired, wiping out 70% of his company's value in 18 months. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom hummed with the distinctive energy of wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over round tables draped in white linen, each setting immaculate, each placement calculated according to the complex hierarchy of corporate America. Damon entered discreetly through a side door, avoiding the main entrance where photographers documented the arrivals of more celebrated attendees. The young hostess consulted her tablet before leading him to his assigned table, positioned at the periphery of the room, far from the main stage and the prime networking territory. "There must be a mistake," he said, noting the table number. "Wellington Enterprises is typically seated near the front." The hostess double-checked her tablet. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wellington. These assignments were finalized yesterday. Perhaps speak with the event coordinator if you have concerns?" Damon forced a smile, unwilling to reveal his diminished status through protest. "No matter. This is fine." He ordered a Macallan neat from a passing server and surveyed the room, recognizing former allies now engaged in animated conversations with his competitors. The isolation was palpable. The financial world had already determined Wellington Enterprises was yesterday's news. A sudden hush fell over the crowd near the main entrance, followed by a wave of movement as attendees turned toward the doors. The event coordinator hurried forward, accompanied by several photographers. Curious, Damon shifted in his seat for a better view, and then he saw her. Amara entered the ballroom with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged precisely where she stood. Her sapphire Dior dress caught the light as she moved, setting off her warm brown skin to perfection. But it wasn't just her appearance that commanded attention, it was the unmistakable aura of success that surrounded her, the same quality Damon had once prided himself on projecting. For a moment, he doubted his eyes. The poised, powerful woman gliding through the crowd bore little resemblance to the uncertain young woman he'd dismissed from his life 12 years ago. But before he could process this transformation, his attention was captured by the 3 pre-adolescents walking beside her. The girls wore complementary dresses that somehow managed to be both age-appropriate and fashion-forward. The boy, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, carried himself with the same confident posture as his mother. All 3 shared identical features that struck Damon with the force of physical blow. Caramel skin several shades lighter than Amara's, and eyes of such a distinctive shade of blue that Damon instinctively knew their origin. "Ms. Jones, it's an honor to have you with us," the event coordinator gushed, loud enough for Damon to overhear. "Your table is prepared near the stage." Damon's hand tightened around his whiskey glass as he watched Amara being escorted to one of the premium tables traditionally reserved for keynote speakers and major corporate sponsors. The children followed, moving with a grace and composure remarkable for their age. "It can't be," he whispered, almost spilling his drink as the truth crashed over him. The morning's presentations passed in a blur for Damon. He registered nothing of the economic forecasts and innovation panels, his attention fixed on Amara's table where she engaged effortlessly with CEOs and venture capitalists who once would have courted his attention. When her turn to speak arrived, the introduction was effusive. It is with immense pleasure that we welcome one of the most inspiring success stories of the past decade. Starting from scratch, this extraordinary woman has built a company valued at nearly $4 billion, revolutionizing hospital management across America and saving billions for our healthcare system. Please welcome Amara Jones, CEO of Jones Healthcare Solutions. The applause thundered through the ballroom as Amara ascended the stage with measured confidence. Her presentation was technically flawless and delivered with natural charisma, covering innovations in healthcare administration that had transformed patient outcomes while reducing costs. Damon watched, transfixed by the authority with which she commanded the room, the same room where he had once been the celebrated visionary. To conclude, I'd like to demonstrate our newest application designed to help patients navigate complex hospital systems, Amara announced. And for this, I'm proud to introduce Alexandria, Audrey, and Elijah Jones, who not only inspired many of our innovations but have also contributed directly to our growth. The three children joined her on stage, professional and poised beyond their years. Alexandria and Audrey led the demonstration with remarkable eloquence, explaining how the application worked from a patient perspective. Then Elijah stepped forward, detailing the algorithmic foundations with a clarity that impressed even the technology executives present. The predictive routing function I developed, Elijah explained, his voice clear and confident, anticipates resource needs based on historical admission patterns, reducing wait times by 43% in our pilot hospitals. From his isolated table, Damon stared in paralyzed disbelief. These were unquestionably his children, the miscalculations he had rejected before they were born. Now they stood before America's business elite, articulate and accomplished, making contributions to a billion-dollar company at an age when most children were concerned with video games and social media. The presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause. During the following cocktail reception, Damon watched as investors and hospital administrators flocked around Amara and the children, eager to continue conversations about implementation and partnership opportunities. Drawing a deep breath, Damon straightened his tie and approached their group, waiting for a break in the conversation. When the pharmaceutical executive speaking with Amara excused himself to take a call, Damon seized his opportunity. "Amara," he said, his voice emerging weaker than he'd intended. She turned slowly, her expression betraying no surprise or disturbance at his presence. The recognition was immediate, but her perfectly composed features revealed nothing of her inner thoughts. "Damon Wellington," she responded with professional formality. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Could we speak privately?" he asked, acutely aware of curious glances from nearby attendees. "We're at a networking event, Damon," she replied, maintaining her pleasant smile. "Any conversation can be conducted right here." At that moment, Elijah approached, unaware of the tension crackling between the adults. "Mom, Mrs. Montgomery from Cleveland Clinic wants to discuss implementing our system in their pediatric department," he informed her before noticing Damon. "Oh, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt." Damon stared at the boy, unable to mask his shock at seeing his own features reflected so clearly in his son's face. "You didn't interrupt, sweetheart," Amara assured him, placing her hand protectively on his shoulder. "This is Damon Wellington of Wellington Enterprises. Mr. Wellington, this is my son, Elijah." "Your son," Damon repeated, his voice barely audible. "My Elijah Jones," Amara cut in firmly, "one of the youngest developers to create a patented algorithm in the healthcare sector." The boy extended his hand politely. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Wellington. I read about your company in an economics case study at school, about how traditional conglomerates struggle to adapt to new technologies." The innocent comment hit Damon like a precision strike. "The pleasure is mine," he responded automatically, shaking the hand of the son he had never known. At that moment, the event host tapped a crystal glass with a silver spoon, drawing everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have an extraordinary announcement. Jones Healthcare Solutions has just confirmed the acquisition of Wellington Enterprises for $1.2 billion, in a deal that will reposition both companies in the global market for healthcare and financial technology. A murmur swept through the ballroom as all eyes turned toward Amara and Damon, still standing face to face. Camera flashes captured the absolute shock on his face and the serene smile on hers. "I intended to inform you personally tomorrow," said Amara calmly, "but it seems our communications department was more efficient." While surrounded by photographers capturing the historic moment, neither Amara nor Damon could have imagined the conversation that would take place the following morning, when he would appear at her office demanding explanations, only to discover that she had meticulously planned not just the acquisition of his company, but also the revelation of the truth to the triplets. The crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the assembled business elite as Amara took center stage. The shock of the acquisition announcement still rippled through the ballroom, but she moved with practiced composure to the podium. Behind her, 3 immaculately dressed 11-year-olds waited with the poise of individuals far beyond their years. "Thank you for that introduction, and for the unexpected announcement," she began, her voice carrying effortlessly across the hushed room. "As you've just heard, Jones Healthcare Solutions is expanding into new territory. But before we discuss that future, I'd like to share how we revolutionized healthcare administration through technological innovation." For the next 30 minutes, Amara delivered a masterclass in business presentation, weaving complex data with accessible examples, illustrating how her systems had reduced administrative costs while improving patient outcomes. Her slides were crisp, her delivery flawless. Throughout, Damon remained frozen in his seat, his whiskey untouched as he watched the woman he had once dismissed command the room with undeniable authority. "The healthcare system's greatest challenge isn't medical, it's administrative inefficiency," Amara continued, her confidence evident in every gesture. "By reimagining these systems from the patient perspective rather than the institutional one, we've achieved what traditional approaches couldn't." From his peripheral table, Damon noticed how CEOs leaned forward when she spoke, how venture capitalists nodded appreciatively at her metrics. They were giving her the respect he had once commanded, the respect he had been certain she would never earn without his name attached to hers. "And now, I'd like to demonstrate our newest innovation, a patient-centered navigation application that revolutionizes how people interact with complex healthcare systems." Amara turned toward the wings with evident pride. "For this demonstration, please welcome Alexandria, Audrey, and Elijah Jones." The triplets walked on stage with synchronized grace. Alexandria, in her midnight blue dress, stood slightly ahead, while Audrey in white positioned herself at the demonstration tablet. Elijah, serious in his tailored suit, took his place at the secondary podium. "Our application operates on 3 principles," Alexandria began, her voice clear and confident. "Predictive anticipation of patient needs, personalized routing through complex systems, and real-time resource allocation." Damon's breath caught as he watched her gestures, the same precise hand movements he used during his own presentations, a mannerism he couldn't have taught her but somehow had passed along through blood. Audrey continued the demonstration, her gentle voice belying the technical complexity of what she was explaining. "When a patient enters their symptoms and insurance information, the system immediately maps the optimal care pathway, factoring in current wait times, provider availability, and the patient's specific medical history." The audience watched, transfixed, as the sophisticated application responded to Audrey's inputs. Hospital administrators in particular appeared impressed, several taking notes rapidly. Then Elijah stepped forward, and Damon felt an uncomfortable tightness in his chest. The boy's confidence, his articulation, his commanding presence, all unmistakably reminiscent of himself at his peak. "The foundation of this system is a proprietary algorithm I developed that predicts resource allocation needs with 97% accuracy," Elijah explained, cycling through technical specifications with ease. By analyzing historical admission patterns against temporal variables, we can anticipate bottlenecks before they occur and reroute resources proactively rather than reactively. A murmur of amazement rippled through the audience, not just at the sophistication of the system, but at the fact that a child had contributed so significantly to its development. Several technology executives exchanged impressed glances. The algorithm resulted in an additional 15% efficiency improvement across our pilot hospitals, Elijah concluded with quiet confidence. When the demonstration ended, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Multiple attendees rose to their feet, including several hospital CEOs known for their skepticism of new technologies. Damon remained seated, his hands unable to move, still processing what he had witnessed. As the cocktail reception began, Amara and the triplets were immediately surrounded by interested executives eager to discuss implementation possibilities. Damon observed from a distance, nursing his whiskey, watching as his children, the children he had called a miscalculation, charmed some of the most powerful people in American business. After 20 minutes of internal debate, Damon finally gathered his courage and approached the circle surrounding Amara. He waited for a break in conversation, then stepped forward. "Amara," he said, his voice emerging thinner than intended. She turned toward him, her expression revealing nothing. The recognition was instantaneous, but her face remained professionally composed, betraying neither anger nor surprise. "Damon Wellington," she responded with the polite tone one might use with a distant acquaintance. "I didn't expect to see you here." Her voice, so different from the desperate, pleading tones of their last encounter, sent a chill through him. The woman before him bore no resemblance to the one he had dismissed from his penthouse 12 years ago. "Could we speak privately?" he asked, acutely aware of curious onlookers. The murmurs around them had quieted as nearby attendees recognized the potential drama unfolding. "We're at a networking event, Damon," she replied, maintaining her pleasant, professional smile. "Any conversation can be conducted right here." Before he could respond, Elijah approached, unaware of the tension crackling between the adults. "Mom, Mrs. Montgomery from Cleveland Clinic wants to discuss implementing our system in their pediatric department," he said, then noticed Damon. "Oh, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt." Damon stared at the boy, a physical shock running through his body. Looking at Elijah was like seeing a younger version of himself, the same jawline, the same analytical gaze, and most distinctively, the same piercing blue eyes that had been a Wellington family trademark for generations. "You didn't interrupt, sweetheart," Amara assured him, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. "This is Damon Wellington of Wellington Enterprises. Mr. Wellington, this is my son, Elijah." "Your son," Damon repeated, the words barely audible. "My—" "Elijah Jones," Amara interrupted firmly, "one of the youngest developers to create a patented algorithm in the healthcare sector." The boy extended his hand with perfect manners. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Wellington. I read about your company in an economics case study at school, about how traditional conglomerates struggle to adapt to new technologies." The innocent comment struck Damon like a physical blow. He wondered if Amara had coached the boy, but the genuine curiosity in Elijah's eyes suggested otherwise. "The pleasure is mine," he responded automatically, shaking the hand of the son he had never known. The touch, his son's hand in his for the first time, sent an unexpected wave of emotion through Damon. Before he could process it, the event host tapped a crystal glass, calling for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have an extraordinary announcement. Jones Healthcare Solutions has just confirmed the acquisition of Wellington Enterprises for $1.2 billion in a deal that will reposition both companies in the global market for healthcare and financial technology." A stunned silence fell across the ballroom before erupting into excited conversation. All eyes turned toward Amara and Damon, still standing face to face. Camera flashes captured the moment, his expression of absolute shock contrasting with her composed smile. "I intended to inform you personally tomorrow," said Amara calmly, "but it seems our communications department was more efficient." "You bought my company?" Damon stammered, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what had just happened. "How? Why?" "Strategic diversification," she responded with the same clinical precision she would use in any business discussion. "Your financial infrastructure complements our healthcare management systems. As for how, we offered a fair value considering Wellington Enterprises' current situation." At that moment, Alexandria and Audrey joined them, curious about the commotion. The girls stood on either side of their brother, creating an unintentional tableau that emphasized their identical features. "Girls, this is Damon Wellington, the founder of the company we just acquired." Amara introduced them with practiced neutrality. The twins offered polite greetings, completely unaware of their biological connection to the stranger before them. Damon stood transfixed, studying three young faces that each reflected aspects of himself: Alexandria's determined gaze, Audrey's graceful composure, Elijah's analytical intensity. "They're extraordinary," he murmured, more to himself than to Amara. "Yes, they are," she confirmed simply. "If you'll excuse us, we should speak with the Cleveland Clinic representatives." As Amara guided the children away, photographers continued capturing images of the historic business moment, unaware they were documenting a far more complex personal drama. Damon remained rooted in place, watching his children disappear into the crowd, feeling the ground shifting beneath his feet. The next morning, as headlines about the acquisition dominated financial news websites, Damon stood in the elevator of the Jones Healthcare Solutions headquarters, rehearsing what he would say when he confronted Amara. He couldn't have known that she had anticipated this visit, having meticulously planned not just the acquisition of his company, but also how she would finally reveal the truth to the triplets. The headlines in the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg told the story in bold type. "Jones acquires Wellington in stunning market move." The business world buzzed with analysis of the unexpected consolidation, with commentators debating whether the $1.2 billion price tag represented fair value or a distressed sale. In her Back Bay townhouse, Amara sat at the breakfast counter, scanning the coverage on her tablet while the triplets prepared for school. The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and the cinnamon toast that had become their morning ritual. "Mom, we're trending on LinkedIn," Alexandria announced, glancing up from her phone. "Your photo with Mr. Wellington has over 50,000 shares." Before Amara could respond, her phone buzzed with a call from her communications director. "The acquisition is driving our stock up 17% since market opening," the executive reported. "But there are rumors circulating about your past with Wellington. Forbes wants an exclusive interview about the story behind the acquisition." "Thank our PR team for their excellent work," Amara replied calmly. "And please decline the Forbes request politely. This moment is about the company's future, not personal histories." As she ended the call, Amara turned to find all three children watching her from the kitchen doorway, their expressions unusually serious. "Is it true that man at the summit is our biological father?" Alexandria asked directly, her piercing blue eyes, so like Damon's, fixed intently on Amara's face. The question Amara had been preparing for since yesterday's encounter hung in the air. She took a deep breath, setting down her coffee mug carefully. "How did you figure it out?" she asked, gesturing for them to sit at the counter with her. "We researched Wellington Enterprises last night," Elijah explained, his expression thoughtful. "We found old photos of you with him at social events. The dates match up." "And our eyes," Audrey added softly, touching the corner of her eye. "They're identical to his." Amara nodded, her composure intact though her heart raced. "Yes, Damon Wellington is your biological father." The three exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them that Amara had observed since they were infants. "Why did he never look for us?" Alexandria asked, her voice steady but tinged with hurt. Because he chose not to be part of our lives, Amara answered, offering the honest truth she had always promised them. When I told him I was pregnant with you three, he decided that a family didn't fit into his plans. And now you bought his company, Elijah observed, connecting the dots with his usual analytical precision. Is it revenge? No, sweetheart. It's business, Amara explained carefully. Wellington Enterprises has technology and connections that can benefit our expansion. The fact that it belonged to your biological father is merely coincidental. Do you still hate him? Audrey asked, her intuitive nature cutting straight to the emotional core. Amara considered the question seriously. No, she answered, surprising herself with the truth of it. Hating would require him to still occupy a significant space in my life. What I feel today is indifference. Before they could continue their conversation, Amara's phone buzzed with an urgent message from her office. Damon Wellington had arrived unannounced and was demanding to see her. We'll talk more about this tonight, she promised the triplets as they gathered their school bags. Remember that nothing changes who we are or what we've built together. 90 minutes later, Amara sat reviewing acquisition documents in her office when her assistant's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Wellington is insisting on seeing you. He's quite emphatic. Send him in, Amara replied calmly, saving her work and straightening the already immaculate desk. Damon burst through the door, his composure shattered in a way Amara had never witnessed during their brief marriage. His normally perfect appearance showed signs of hasty preparation, his collar slightly askew, his eyes bloodshot from what appeared to be a sleepless night. How could you do this? He demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. Using our children as pawns in this power game. Our children? Amara repeated, raising an eyebrow. Interesting how they became ours only after you realized their extraordinary potential. Damon paced before her desk, running a hand through his graying hair. I have the right to know them, he insisted. They're my legitimate heirs. Legally, they are not, Amara corrected him, her voice level. You renounced all parental rights in the divorce, remember? That document you were so eager to sign to rid yourself of complications. The word hung between them, a deliberate echo of his dismissal 12 years earlier. Damon sank into the chair across from her desk, the fight suddenly leaving his body. I made a terrible mistake, he admitted, his voice hoarse. I was young, ambitious, and stupid. You were 35, Damon, Amara reminded him, old enough to understand the consequences of your choices. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, illuminating the stark contrast between them. Amara poised and powerful behind her executive desk, Damon diminished in the visitor's chair, the roles they once occupied completely reversed. What do you want from me now? He asked, his voice hollow. You have my company. My reputation is in tatters. What else is there to take? Nothing, Amara answered simply. I don't want anything from you. I never did. Then why specifically buy my company? Because it was vulnerable, undervalued, and has technology we can enhance, she explained with the same objectivity she would use in any business discussion. Exactly how you saw me 12 years ago. The following weekend, after careful consideration and family discussions, Amara arranged a supervised lunch between the triplets and Damon at a private dining room in the Four Seasons. She watched from across the table as Damon awkwardly attempted to connect with children who regarded him with polite curiosity but emotional distance. Your violin playing is extraordinary, he told Alexandria after she reluctantly demonstrated a brief passage at his request. And Audrey, your piano technique is remarkable for someone so young. Mom found us excellent teachers, Alexandria replied, her protective instinct toward her siblings evident in her formal tone. When Elijah explained his algorithm in technical terms that Damon struggled to follow, the disconnect between father and son became painfully apparent. The mathematical genius Damon had never fostered now operated at a level beyond his comprehension. They are extraordinary, Damon commented to Amara as the children examined the dessert menu, not just in their obvious talents but in their character, their composure. "Qualities they inherited from you," Amara acknowledged, her tone softening slightly. "No," he corrected, watching the three identical profiles bent over the menus. "From you." In the weeks that followed, Damon made increasingly desperate attempts to insert himself into the triplets' lives, sending expensive gifts, offering international trips, promising exclusive opportunities at prestigious institutions. During a transition meeting at Jones Healthcare Solutions, Amara addressed his approach directly. "We can't buy back the time lost, Damon," she explained, her tone professional but firm. "They need honesty and consistency, not material compensation." The inevitable media revelation came 6 weeks after the acquisition. An investigative reporter pieced together the personal history behind the business transaction, publishing a detailed account of their brief marriage, Damon's abandonment during Amara's pregnancy, and his decade-long refusal to acknowledge his children. Rather than hiding from the story, Amara chose transparency. At a carefully orchestrated press conference, she confirmed the basic facts without dramatization or accusation. "Yes, I was briefly married to Damon Wellington. Yes, he chose not to participate in raising our children. And yes, our companies have now merged for strictly commercial reasons. The personal history belongs to the past. Our focus is the future of Jones Healthcare Solutions." Her professional, straightforward approach neutralized the potential scandal while simultaneously cementing her reputation as an unshakable leader. For Damon, however, the consequences were devastating. Remaining clients abandoned Wellington Enterprises, his new relationship with a Boston socialite collapsed under public scrutiny, and former allies distanced themselves to protect their own reputations. 6 months after the acquisition, Damon requested a final meeting with Amara before leaving Boston to start over in California. They met in her office, the integration of their companies nearly complete, the Wellington name already fading from corporate materials. "You've won in every respect," he acknowledged, looking older than his years. "You've built an empire greater than mine ever was, raised 3 extraordinary children, and finally made me understand what I lost." "It was never about winning, Damon," Amara replied with genuine serenity. "It was about surviving initially, then thriving, and finally living fully." "Will they ever forgive me?" he asked, referring to the children he had barely begun to know. "Perhaps, with time and genuine effort, but it won't be instantaneous or easy." As Damon left her office for the final time, Amara felt none of the vindictive triumph she had once imagined. Instead, she experienced a sense of closure and complete liberation. That evening at home, listening to Alexandria and Audrey practicing for a charity concert while watching Elijah work on a new algorithm, Amara realized her true victory wasn't in surpassing Damon or acquiring his company. The real triumph was there, in the resilient family she had built, in the empire she had created with integrity, and in the certainty that her worth had never depended on validation from someone who couldn't recognize it. The following year, Jones Healthcare Solutions surpassed the $5 billion market valuation milestone. In her speech at the opening ceremony for the new global headquarters in Boston, Amara looked at the triplets seated in the front row, now 12-year-old teenagers with brilliant futures ahead, and concluded with the words that defined her journey. "The greatest power isn't in making others regret their mistakes, but in transforming those mistakes into stepping stones to a life they could never have imagined for you." If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.